Good afternoon, everyone. I can see people are joining us. We'll wait for you all to tick into the webinar. I hope everyone's having a lovely afternoon or a lovely day so far. It's a little grey and cloudy down here in Cornwall, but a lot warmer than it was this time last week. So I hope you're all in much more stable environments. Welcome to today's webinar. You will know why you're here. We're talking about total talent and early talent and a skills first approach. And I'm delighted to say that we've got Nikki Garchea and Hayley Bowd with us. I'll hand over to them in just a moment. But as always, if you've got questions as we go through, please pop them in the Q&A. I'm happy to say we're recording this, so this will be available to members soon this afternoon. Nikki and Hayley are very happy to be sharing the slides later too. So you'll get all of this information. You can just settle back and enjoy. And Nikki, I'm going to hand over straight to you.
Thank you so much. Well, if anyone saw my LinkedIn post this morning, they'll know that the last time Hayley and I presented together, we were in a gigantic ballroom in Florida, looking at each other, kind of thinking, this is like we should be doing a concert. So we're in a slightly more relaxed, over lunch, maybe coffee scenario today, but nonetheless, still delighted to be with you. Some of you obviously joining live, some of you will be listening back, and really pleased to be able to kick off the new year with this topic. I feel like this topic has been a massive part of my career to date, but it has got a lot of resurgence of late, and we will go into kind of why we think that's happening. I'll just briefly say a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to hand to Hayley and also let her share a little bit about Expedia and some of the things that they're focused on before I kind of go into the topic in a bit more detail. I guess I'm feeling slightly old these days. I have been working at Cappfinity, set it up 18 years ago, and really been working alongside ISE for many of those years. So really pleased to be able to continue this work in this space. And I think at these times, particularly with a skills-led approach, it's really critical that we keep committed to these topics to support the generations of talent that are going to need to take the roles that will be fast approaching and are coming up, these different roles all of the time. From a Cappfinity perspective, we are a 200 strong organisation working out of the UK, the US, Australia and Ireland, and supporting many other countries and regions. We are providing a skill suite offering that straddles both recruitment and talent development. And in everything we're doing, we're bringing a combination of services that can help organisations discover the skills they need, and then also products which help with things like online assessment, virtual assessment centres, through to talent development programmes. And I'll share a tiny bit of that as we go through the session today. And Hayley will speak a little about where Cappfinity and Expedia have worked together. But the thrust of this session is much more around kind of how to build total talent strategies and where they might vary from just a pure early career strategy. So without further ado, I'm going to hand to Hayley to introduce herself. And Hayley, I know you've had a really busy start to the year, so thank you for the preparation for this and also joining. But please share with everyone a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Nikki. And hi, everyone. So my name's Hayley. I'm part of the Emerging Talent and Careers Leadership team at Expedia. So we are a global team. I would reference us as a small but mighty team. And actually, we've just gone through a change in name. So previously, we were the Early Careers team at Expedia Group. This is really topical because we're sort of on this journey right now of thinking about going from early talent to total talent. And that's one of the reasons. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm based out of our London office, and I'm here today. And I've been with Expedia for a little over 4 years now. But I've worked sort of on and off in the emerging talent early career space for over a decade. So I always find my way back to it. If I go to do a different role, I always find my way back to coming back to early careers. So really excited to be here today and just tell you a bit more. And as I said, we're something we're working through at the moment. Sometimes it's really helpful to hear what others are doing. Definitely really happy if others are thinking the same things to connect up after this, have conversations. it's always really, really useful to be connected on things like this and knowledge share. So really good to meet everyone. Excited to get into it today. So just to tell you, may already know a little bit about Expedia Group or who we are, but just to give a little bit of a summary. So Expedia Group is actually made up of over 20 global travel brands. So we are an organization that sits almost on the cusp of travel and technology. So providing a platform for the 3 million properties on site. We exist in over 70 different countries and actually over 200 different travel websites. So actually a large organization. Our team is globally spread. We hire on a global level. And you may recognize some of our brands. So you've got the Expedia Group brand. You've also got hotels.com and then Verbo, which is a vacation rental site. So a variety of brands under the portfolio and a tech platform that sits underneath that. In terms of our, oh, I thought we were going to go into programs, but I'll hand back to you, Nikki.
It's a well-oiled machine here. So before I ask Hayley about some of the changes that have happened at Expedia, moving and exploring this total talent approach, I just want to kind of highlight a couple of things, and thank you. Mike Harris from my team has posted some of the resources that I just wanted to kind of make you aware of as you listen to the presentation. And also, please do contact Mike. He's going to put his email in if you would like the slides, and also if you would like the Cappfinity taxonomy of human skills with their definitions, which Hayley and I will talk a little bit about as we go through the presentation today. One of the resources which Mike's popping in the chat now is some access to a collection of videos that were taken live at Breakfast News at the end of 2023. And Stephen Isherwood, co-CEO of ISE, spoke with a number of people, but a couple of things came out that really resonated with Hayley and I when we were popping the presentation together. And one of the things that Stephen was advocating for was that in order to think about the future of emerging talent, and particularly early career talent, we needed to do that with a total talent lens. And one of the things that he highlighted, and many of you listening will have heard it many times, but I think it is becoming more and more apparent that we will need to look at broader strategies. You forgive me to look down because I want to give you the right figures. But Stephen mentioned that there were 100,000 less births last year. So the birth rate dropped by 15%. And we've seen this in the UK year on year now for several years. And over the last 17 years, the need for higher skilled jobs, there's now 5 million more higher skilled jobs than there was when I first started Cappfinity. So we've got this combination of a reduction in the birth rate. So the number of young people that are available year on year to move into early career jobs is less. And we do see this in other countries, but also the need for higher skilled jobs is really increasing. And you will see the new World Economic Forum report for jobs has just come out again for 24. Many of us reference that data across 23. The need for a variety of new skills to be adopted is massively increasing. Stephen mentioned 3 things for us to really think about. One was the increase, therefore, of skills-based hiring in schools. The second was skills entering into university and education-based curriculum in a much bigger way than just a focus on academics. And then the third is workplace education and also workplace pre-skilling. So the link between university or the link between other training providers and workplaces, but then also within workplaces, a radical increase in upskilling. And some of the McKinsey reports that Mike's published will give you kind of data on the ROI of doing that. So as I transition to ask Hayley the journey they're on, I just wanted you to have that background of why this topic is growing with such great momentum, but also make sure you've got access to some of the additional resources that Hayley and I have been borrowing as we've been thinking about this topic. So Hayley, first of all, just share with us, and I know that you are kind of on this journey as opposed to telling us the completed story, but how is taking this total talent approach kind of changing across your programs? Maybe tell us a bit of where you were and where you're heading to.
Yeah, and this slide, I think, anyone looking at this slide, the programs mentioned probably aren't surprising for those who work in our space, and probably, feel probably similar to where a lot of companies are. And I guess this is our current state of the different programs that we're offering, and very much feeling still in that early talent space. The middle two boxes here, internship program, graduate program, that university campus channel has definitely been where we've been past tense. And it will remain a really important pipeline for us. I don't think there's anything around, moving away completely from that. I think early talent remains a really important part of strategy. But I think to Nikki's point, looking at all of the data, looking at demographic market data, there's this need to think about broader routes. And we've almost talked about the term of how do we open more doors into our organization. So some of these areas, our apprenticeship program, how do we think about really scaling that up and thinking about it in different ways? And then to the right, the career discovery program is that more of a insight to our organization, still on the earlier talent side of things. So one of the things we're looking at, and there's lots of discovery work going on right now, we've got a couple of really impactful pilots that have been running. So in the US, for example, we have a Hiring Our Heroes pilot that's been running, hiring veterans into roles at Expedia Group. We had a pilot also around caregivers and bringing caregivers back from parental leave into the workforce and providing a program for them. So lots of discovery around those parts, but and actually part of our move from the name Early Careers to Emerging Talent was that talent can and does emerge from lots of different places. And when you just focused on the early talent route, you're looking at schools, universities, when you could be looking at many more talent communities and groups. So there's a lot of impact to be had. When I think about our university routes, that's where we've definitely leveraged the skills-based approach. And we'll talk more about that. But it's been really interesting thinking about what are the core skills that we would look at and are important for our organization. And then how do we think about that as we then think about the different talent groups that we're looking to bring in. So very much current state, lots of work going on to where we could take that and the different programs that we could offer. So our team are very busy at the moment thinking about that and how it applies to business need as well. Where are the skill sets that we need to hire for? And where does it make sense to bring in some of these programs, as well as all that supporting data on why we should be doing it?
Hayley, I think you're going to come to this, but Sam Parkins have just added into chat, if you could share as you go through now, who your internship programs are open to.
Yeah, so our intern program at the moment is a global program, and you'll just see on the world map that's coming up now the some of the locations, all of the locations we hire in, and the numbers we had for 2023, including it will pop up our very high application number, which shocks many when they find out how many applications we received globally. But I think the internship program is a summer program, so depending on the market, between 8 and 14 weeks. And we target those in penultimate year of study. So the internship program has been a pipeline to the graduate program. So the interns come in and join us. Typically, we're hiring the year before. Come in and join us for the summer, have that experience with us, and then have the potential to think about a graduate role the following year. So that's typically where the internship programs, and our volumes have been high in the past. The intern routes and graduate routes have been very high numbers. You'll see from some of these numbers, 2023, we made over 1,000 hires. But then, and now as we're thinking about total talent, what does the university route look like? What do those numbers look like? And where do other programs start to have an impact here?
Thank you.
And then just very quickly, just to give a bit of insight to the types of roles that we recruit for. So actually over 90% of our hiring is tech. And then we do also have areas around marketing, commercial, finance as well. So yeah, but most of the roles are tech.
And Hayley, as we transition to think about some of the skills that you have adopted to support this approach, would you just share some of the kind of drivers for the business of why you're even considering moving to where you were being predominantly early career to taking more of a total talent approach?
I think there's a number of things. So I think thinking about the external data, there's also a huge focus if we think about inclusion and diversity. And in the past, it's something, I think lots of businesses really see early talent as a great way to bring in lots of diverse individuals, many different communities, and thinking about bringing those individuals into an organization. But I think when you then think about total talent, and we think about advantages to the business, there's even more talent pools you can tap into. And so I think there's even more of a benefit as you start to think about inclusion and diversity. I think there's also the element of, lots of our different stakeholders and anyone you work with across the business, they've had their own lived experiences. And so when you start thinking about building programs around veterans, caregivers, I think it's, lots of people maybe have done graduate programs and internship programs, but I think stakeholders can draw on their lived experiences and think about, the benefits actually of, how do we bring parents back to the business or caregivers? How do we give that structured program and really support them to have impact, and to come in and, perform and look at things like retention and attrition and all of those areas to justify the programs.
We're getting a few questions. A lot of them are skills based, so I'm going to ask those questions at that point. I'm curious, when you think about the different programs that you have, and don't share if you can't, but are there any particular groups that you think are either most open to taking a total talent approach, or any which, because of just pipeline requirement, are going to have to take a total talent approach?
I think it might be too early to say. So I think there'll be a mix. And I think one of the pieces that we're looking at is how do we go out and educate more stakeholders on this approach? And how do we start to think about even driving awareness? Because I think I think it's a common problem, lots of you probably agree, in the early career space and the early talent space, there's a challenge around, going out and educating about the programs and the benefits and the why and why you should take an apprentice and the value they can bring to the business. So I think our teams are going to have that twofold as you start to think about even more programs and diversifying those. So I think there is a real need to really build that justification up front and be able to share that strategy out on why we would have these programs. And I think that's where some of the data we already have from, GTI Breakfast News, some of the ISE data, we can feed that in and then start to think about the impact internally as well and relate it to your organization.
Brilliant. Well, I'm going to come back to you on that one to see. So one of the things alongside, I guess, this emerging strategic need for you to be adopting a total talent approach is also how skills-based approaches can help facilitate actually spotting that talent. And we've got questions from Panjit and Sam in the chat kind of on what those skills are and links between those skills and what you're doing with university programs and attraction. So we need to cover those topics off. One of the things I just wanted to tee up, and we get asked this a lot from a Cappfinity perspective, is the interconnection between skills and strengths. And one of the things that we talk about a lot at Cappfinity and have done for many years is that if you want to help a candidate or somebody already employed in your organisation to understand if the skill they possess is a strength, then we look at the lens of both how capable can they perform that skill well, but also is the motivation there to deliver that skill. And particularly when we're in roles that might be transitional, so I might be talent and move across the business, I might be a career changer, sometimes the motivation might be higher than the capability, and therefore we're going to, as a business, put more emphasis in developing that capability so that the will and the potential that's there will be married up with the capability over time. So sometimes you see the potential for a skill, but it's not yet a fully realized strength. So that's a methodology we find that works really, really well from a total talent perspective. The other thing that, and Mike will be able to share this with you, Mike's email is in the chat if you want our skills taxonomy, is that we break skills between technical skills, so things like coding. Hayley uses HackerRank for her coding support. We also have partnerships with people like Codility. Then we have cognitive skills that will be critical reasoning, verbal reasoning, the skills that might relate to intellect, and then the human and behavioural skills, which are going to cover a broad range of things from communication skills to my capacity to think. And it's often that fusion of things that makes a great total talent strategy. One of the pieces, particularly when we're looking at emerging talent and bringing in groups that are diverse, is that we will often emphasize those behavioral skills more, and also have an acceptance from a business that they're going to put more emphasis on the motivation being there rather than the past experience. So just a couple of bits I wanted to share in terms of the methodology that we've worked with Expedia on, and also this broader piece around skills and strengths. So we've worked with Hayley and the team at Expedia for a number of years, but one of the foundation parts of that was bringing together, from a global perspective, identifying the skills for this emerging talent strategy that Hayley would then build out interventions on the basis of these skills that were really going to support all of those programs at all levels that Hayley's recruiting for. So I'll just turn to you again, Hayley, and just, if you can, in your own words, share a little bit about how these skills manifest and the journey that you've been on with them. And perhaps we can pick up some of those questions around I guess, how they're supporting employability, and anything you're doing around attraction in relation to the skills as well.
Yeah, and I think there's been and when Nikki and I have been talking about this topic, there often comes up a theme of the human element combined with the technology element. And I think when we think about our key skills, we went through an extensive process to determine these areas. So it was, I mean, there's some text on the slide, but it was, multifaceted in terms of how we came up with it. We looked at our graduate population and high performing graduates and the skills they showed. We had focus group surveys. We had interviews with senior stakeholders who were helping to drive the program around the expectations longer term. And these are sort of the 8 areas that came up most predominantly. So these sit in what we call top of funnel assessment. And the key thing around the human element is the experience. So the assessment that determines skills, it really helped to enable our process. And if you think about the number of applications we're getting, candidates go through this assessment, which is shares more about Expedia Group as an organisation. And we've actually just rebranded it as some of our branding change. So we've gone through that process to update the experience so it feels up to date with the new branding. And then candidates, if they meet minimum criteria for the role, they jump forward to this assessment. We've actually removed the need to sit and screen CVs. So I think when we think about, CV and candidates worrying about the experience on their CV and on their profile, we can really think about, we want candidates to meet this skill profile, and we want to show that they've got the potential for the role, and it actually doesn't matter the specific university they went to or the degree they did, or the specifics, did they do an internship last year? Actually, it shouldn't matter. And I think that really helps us to think about that fair and objective process. So we still have an attraction strategy, we still go and speak to students on campus, but actually the approach is almost come and apply for us, and you've got a very fair and hopefully engaging process as well. The other thing I would just say is around the data. So these skills, we launched this for our hiring season last year. So we had multiple thousands of people that went through, and we've been able to keep a close eye on data, and that's been really important. How do we know that these skills will continue to be relevant? And that's where we've been reviewing things like engagement, how many people are taking the assessment, what's the completion rate? How do we then compare? We've just done our analysis of scoring to performance on our internship program. So continuing, and as we think about total talent, we've got the data now that these skills are relevant when we think about internships and graduate programs. I think as we expand, think about total talent, it will be based on our analysis, we believe these are key skills for our organization, but the data needs to show that, and we need to keep reviewing that as we bring in new programs and make sure we're keeping relevant with the skills the business needs.
I'm going to jump into one of the questions and then hold one back, and I'm holding back the one from Emma Day, but back to Parmjit's question, which is around students sometimes worry about using caring experiences in interviews, and basically should they worry about kind of sharing this as an example. I have a view on this. I've done a lot of interviews over the last 18 years, but Hayley, when you think about, I guess, taking this skills-based approach, if I'm a student, I'm going to give you a caring example or anything non-work. Any reactions to that as an interviewer?
So we support our interviewers with, initial training and support before they go through the process, and we have large pools of interviewers that represent us for groups. And our guidance to interviewers, and my own opinion definitely, is that students are coming with a range of different backgrounds and experiences, and there is relevance to lots of experiences and examples outside of education. And that could, there's lots of examples that doesn't just have to be linked to study or work. There's volunteering experience, there's caregiving experience, there's even things relating to hobbies that I've seen, or extracurricular things at university that make really, really strong examples and show those skills. So it's definitely the advice we give to interviewers, to think and encourage a broad range of examples. That would definitely be my view.
I'm just going to say that having taken this skills and strengths-based approach, both in emerging talent jobs and also people being attracted into other roles that maybe have got no experience, sometimes the best people give you non-work caring responsibilities, something that they've done outside of work in their church or a spiritual organization. They've gone on to do great work. I do think one of the things that Hayley and I will say repeatedly is collecting the data to show that those people went on to do great jobs. The individuals from non-traditional backgrounds, the individuals who did different types of degrees to what the stakeholders expected, that data, but also the qualitative narrative is really, really key. So you're building a book of actually, this is why it works. I didn't actually mean that slide to be so linked to this is why it works, but Hayley, would you just say a little bit high level, you don't need to go into every point here, but some of the results that you're seeing, and then anything, I mean, please share anything that you think you would like to see, but you haven't seen yet that you want to collect.
Yeah, and so as I mentioned, we launched this for our last hiring season. So this is almost a summary of, and I think it was 35,000 people went through the assessment. So we had a really good base of data. One of the big things we as a team were really conscious of is we're a global team. So we're hiring interns and graduates in India, in the UK, and across the US. So the hiring processes are very similar, and we want that there to be that consistency. But we're also very aware that you need to really be aware of regional nuances. And sometimes you need to make sure that if you want global consistency, you're measuring on that level. So that was something we really wanted to look at with this data. How can we make sure it's globally relevant? And we found that there were no significant regional scoring differences, which we were really pleased to see. And we also wanted to look at adverse impact. We wanted to make sure that there was no significant differences between different student groups. So again, we were really pleased to see that with that initial data set. And yeah, you can see on the right-hand side, we've seen candidate feedback is good. There was at the end of the assessment, there's a candidate survey, which is optional. We had a good amount of people complete that. We got some great feedback around innovation and engagement. Completion rate of 97% is 97% of those that started the assessment, completed the assessment, which we were really pleased to see. We did see variances in, the percentage who started in different regions, but we would expect that. And it's interesting then how we can tailor our approach on engaging students to complete it based on what we know around completion rates. since this piece of work, we've also had our first group of interns in last summer. So we've also looked at our first analysis of comparing performance on the strengths assessment to performance in internship role. And we've seen some great results here as well. So 65% of candidates who scored highly on the skills assessment were also top performers in their internship. And also 90% of candidates who got a high score and linked with our skills accepted an offer if we extended it to them. So we're already seeing some trends. And the key thing for us will be continuing this data almost year on year. So interns who become graduates who then continue on the program, we almost want to continue telling this story so that we can show the impact that this is having. So impact from an organizational perspective, and then also on a process perspective, we can look at pipeline health. What does this mean for people progressing to different assessments? So there's many different factors that we look at.
Thanks, Hayley. That's really, really helpful. And as we kind of now share from an Expedia perspective, what are some of the components that you can think about for developing your own total talent strategy? One of the things that Hayley and the team over at Expedia have finessed over the years is this acronym TRAVEL, which always makes me smile when I see it. It also makes me really want to travel every time I see it. And this has been something that I guess has been guiding your strategic approach, but also I'm going to say some of the practical things that you do at Expedia. And one of the points I just want to stress as a smaller business owner is that Expedia do things with a very small team, which I could adopt at Cappfinity. And that's one of the things that I think is great in sessions like this to hear from Hayley, is because there is activities you can hear as she goes through this travel acronym now that we can all implement regardless of the size of our businesses. So it's not the need that you need a gigantic budget and a large team to implement some of the things that will make you attractive to maybe pockets of talent that you weren't necessarily targeting previously, but it's very likely we're all going to need to be targeting in the future because of the things that I mentioned at the start of the session. We are not sharing today actual examples of some of the things that Hayley just mentioned in relation to those results, but we can give you screen grabs via Mike's email just so you can picture what Hayley's talking about, because the assessments are quite immersive in nature. So when we talk about authenticity, it's like visiting an Expedia website. Hayley, you don't necessarily need to go through all of these, but will you just share with us from a total talent perspective some of the things that you think kind of make the biggest difference?
Yeah, and we're also not going to be going through the full toolkit. We do have some slides on this. So this was presented if anyone was at the ISE conference last year, and also NACE over in Orlando. But we've got the full slides if anyone wants to see them and dig in a little bit deeper. And it's got like video content in there and things as well. But so this was almost our toolkit for bringing in this skills-based approach. But as we think about total talent, some of the things that are still really important. So the element of togetherness. So this was, for us, it's about building community, and it's about making sure that if we bring in early talent or total talent, they feel that sense of community and they've got that support from day one. Because there's all well and good attracting great talent and bringing them into an organization, but if the setup and the support and that culture isn't there, that's going to really empower them to perform, it's really, really important. So that's one of the things we've been working on really hard as we think about our cohorts, and we'll continue to do so, even utilizing internal employee resource groups. We have 8 different resource groups, hugely passionate about their various spaces, and actually collaborate all the time, and we make sure our cohorts get opportunities to get involved there as well. Because if we set up more of a caregiving program, but actually someone joins our organization and isn't supported, then how can we expect them to be successful? So really, really important, and something we really want to continue to focus on. Reimagine the power of partnerships, and I think we partner with lots of different organizations, internal teams and also external organizations to do our work. And I think this becomes really important because, as Nikki mentioned, we are a relatively small team, and our team work really hard but sometimes you can't do everything yourself. And if you want to build a program, sometimes it's around finding an external partner or finding someone who can come and support you to do that in the most effective way. Sometimes putting too much pressure on yourself to think, I'm going to build a program single-handedly and launch it in the organization. Sometimes finding that expertise externally actually can work much better and can take some pressure off your internal team. So, there's lots of partnerships that we have, but thinking about that university route, there's definitely some sourcing channels and some schools that we work really closely with. But as we think about apprentices and scaling up, how do we work with partners there to really enable that program, and then review in time what works best for our team and how we take that forward. Authentic insight into life at Expedia Group. So this is one of my favorite parts of the toolkit when we shared it at different conferences, because we had one of our TikTok style videos that our graduates help us to produce. So we enable sort of social ambassadors. We want to tell loads of stories, really authentic content that's quite easy to make, certainly not expensive to make, and it by far gets the most engagement when we share it. But this is still really relevant because it's all about storytelling. So it's about, when you have these programs or where you bring in different groups of individuals and they have a story to tell, it's about giving them the platform to tell that story. That might not be a TikTok style video for some groups, but it might be a blog on our shared on our LinkedIn page. So we can really start to tell stories of people that have come through different programs and are having impact and enjoying their time at our organization. So that's also really key for us. The final one I would probably focus on is eliminate barriers. That's forming a really key part of what we're wanting to do. How do we open more doors? How do we break down barriers? How do we really think more broadly about talent and where it might exist through different programs, through upskilling, reskilling. The other areas are definitely important. So value-added activity, how we streamline, how we make sure our team can focus on value add. And we've mentioned data quite a bit today as well, continues to be very, very important.
Thanks so much, Hayley. Really, really great to hear those examples. And I just echo what you were saying about authenticity. I think your end-to-end approach is incredibly authentic, and you're tailoring that for these different groups so they can feel like there is a role for them and that they would be included and have a sense of belonging. As you go forward into 2024, your 25 strategy, I know that the ambition to adopt an even greater focus and broader focus from a total talent perspective is significant. Would you just share some of your learning, what's next, so that we can learn from that? From anyone listening, I'm holding back a couple of questions that I know Sarah will pose to us, but we could definitely take some more. There will be time. So if there are things you want us to dive into, or if you had a question asked that we haven't fully covered, then please do put it. I've got chat and Q&A open. So we look forward to hearing more of your thoughts. But yeah, what's next, Hayley, from an Expedia perspective?
So we, our recruiting team are very busy at the moment, and we will soon have our next group of applicants, so we can refresh some of this data and add on sort of a year two. So the team are sort of finalising our hiring for 2024 for the roles that we've confirmed with the business already. And then I mentioned we've talked a lot about data and both external data and internal data, but that's really a key focus for us. We really need data to drive where we know we need to go, and to then share that out internally and help to build some of this. What do the programs look like? What are the skills? Who do we work with to be able to enable that? And then also, really importantly, the impact. Wherever we go, we need to be able to really measure the impact as well. So refreshing some of that for our existing programs, and then predicting some of that for some of the newer programs and some of the pilots that we've already run. So that's going to be really, really key for our team, and something we're looking at. And it really underpins everything. What we say we want to do and why we want to do it, underpinning that with data is really important for our organisation. And we've started some really good work with linking mentoring with our programs. So in the last year, every intern that joined was assigned a mentor, every graduate was assigned a mentor. So reviewing some of that, we have an internal colleague who looks after mentoring at Expedia Group. So working with her very closely to think about what does that look like if you join an organization on one of our programs, whether that's early talent, total talent, at various stages of your career, how does mentoring support you? What impact can it have? So that's definitely a key focus for us.
Tell me, Hayley, what's the adoption of mentorship like, both from people coming in, but also volunteers internally?
So our mentoring program has been building actually over the last couple of years. When we have interns and graduates, we assign everybody, so we match everybody with a mentor. I don't have the percentage to hand, but we do then survey at the end of the program. We ask mentors for feedback, mentees for feedback. We've actually just done a survey of our newest graduate cohort. And the feedback's always really strong. It's always, where there's a match in terms of, someone might be a similar role, but in a different part of the organization. There's really strong feedback that's impactful. And sometimes it's just offering a different contact in a different part of the organization. I think especially our organization is big. And I think when you join, even if you're not on a emerging talent program, navigating a business that's as large as ours can be difficult. And even having a point of contact in a different team. So we have, everyone will have their manager, there's typically a buddy that supports them through it. And then having a mentor as well, just someone else to turn to and almost starting. We also have development programs and learning to support them on their way. But it's almost that initial network that you're provided, and then you take it from there.
And any technology you're using to support the kind of facilitation of mentorship?
We have a module within our ATS system, within our HR system, which is all linked. So we have some functionality where you can search for available mentors, and you can initiate that through that technology. It's something else that's been launched in the last year or so. And also as an engagement tool, we use Slack quite a bit. And that's also where, those relationships can be harnessed and matched, and you can find out who your mentor is and keep in touch with them as well.
Brilliant, thank you. So we're going to move into the Q&A now. There are quite a few questions that we can definitely dive into, and I'm going to get Sarah to hand over. I just want to summarise before we go into the Q&A and thank Hayley for what she's shared so far. But essentially what we've covered today is that for any of you considering moving from early career strategies to total talent strategies, I hope you've seen a sense that actually this can be an evolution for you, that many of you are probably already delivering some brilliant things like Hayley's travel acronym that you could be taking and using as part of a total talent approach. It is absolutely the case that taking a skills-based approach, really emphasising those behavioural skills, can help you find new pockets of talent, both in schools, inside your organisation, career changes, broadening internships. And we're seeing traction of that working well globally. I think Hayley's given a great call out to things like mentorship and partnerships, finding new ways of sourcing in this approach for total talent. And then the emphasis on data, the constant collection of what's working, what can we iterate, and being able to feed that back to resistant stakeholders who might not necessarily want to take such a broad approach to finding talent for these jobs that they might have traditionally thought go to somebody with a degree and a particular type of degree from a particular university. So data very key, and we are very committed to continuing to share this story with all of you that have listened in. So I'm going to hand to Sarah. I'm happy to also chime in. There's definitely a few things that we didn't cover, so Sarah, I'll let you pick them out.
Wonderful, thank you both. That was really quite an overview in quite a short space of time. So not surprisingly, yes, there are some questions. I'm sure there's heaps of opportunity to follow up. Let's hop back to Emma's question, which is really for you, Hayley. Any advice on how to approach those internal stakeholders, particularly where they think that the capability is more important than the motivation, which you were talking about earlier on in the presentation? How do you shift that thinking?
Yeah, and I think this is again, I think a broader challenge that a lot of us face in this space, because often when you're thinking about, regardless of what type of program, whether it's apprentice, intern, caregiver, veteran program, often there is a high level of support needed, and quite rightly, for individuals to come in and be successful in the organization. I think getting how you select managers is actually something we're talking about as a team. What is the best approach for actually selecting the managers who will support these on program? Because actually the impact that the manager has is huge. And I think if the manager doesn't understand the support they need to give and the extra coaching and mentoring and extra capability development, then it's very, very difficult. So it is something we're still talking about. The other thing I would say is the offerings that we provide, for example. So we think about the baseline learning that would be relevant. So areas like personal brand, communication skills, presentation skills, all quite key areas of learning that every intern would find beneficial when you come into organization. Or if you're thinking about moving into the corporate world or the world of work, what are some things that are the baseline that we can support with, maybe take some of that pressure off. But I think it's really understanding what is the capability that you then need to build, and then what's your vehicle for being able to do that? Is it something you can do in-house? Do you need to bring in someone externally? And also the manager having that understanding of their role and the role they play and the impact they can have. Nikki,
Thanks,
have you got
Hayley.
anything to add there?
Not to that one, no.
Great, thank you. I know there are some in the Q&A. I'm just going to run through the chat ones first. So how, it's probably one for you, Nikki, how are the administrative and organisational development skills infused with the whole skills-based approach? I mean, you picked up, some of the key skills within the whole presentation, but where did the sort of admin organisational bits come into it?
Let me just go back to the skills, because some of that will come through, and then Hayley might want to talk a little bit about the other pieces. I'm just going to move people out of the way. So one of the things when we put a skills-based approach together is that we will, and this was the case for Hayley, we will go out both with a survey globally, but also speak to stakeholders. And one of the things that we're keen to do is not necessarily look for things that could be trainable. And some of the things like, I don't know, using Excel or PowerPoint that might come up on that sort of admin organizational piece will be seen as trainable. So they won't necessarily feature at the very start of the recruitment process, which these skills would. However, if we were going into a role where planning or organizing was absolutely critical, then that would become kind of a feature here. The closest thing that Expedia would have that in their framework, two things. One is drive, so the capacity, what behaviors do I need to deploy to get the job done? But I might have different strategies for getting that job done. It's not one way. And also adaptability in the same vein of getting the job done or acquiring new skills. Can I be adaptable to learn those skills in order to become a good hire for Expedia within this kind of total talent approach? So those are the things that would still meet the needs of kind of being organised or working well administratively. However, if Hayley was hiring where that was kind of a categorical part of the job, you might see something like planner or organiser within these people skills. But if it's something that they will consider to be trainable, it won't necessarily feature at this very top level from a recruitment perspective. Hayley, not featured there is some of your technical skills. I don't know if you want to say anything about those.
Yeah, I was just going to add, and there's a couple of things linked to that. So this, and we mentioned this is very much top of funnel. We're looking for those behavioural skills, those key skills. But there's also the next step of our process we call like a functional skills assessment. And as I mentioned, 90% of our roles are technical. That typically would be a hacker rank assessment. But where a role isn't so technical, that may be a higher view video interview, something similar, more of a case study, where it would start to dig into some of the skills that are really relevant for that job function. The other thing we're trying to drive, and we've identified some ways we can move forward with this, is a sense of self-awareness. So we're obviously asking candidates to complete this assessment. We know that's a big ask of candidates. We want to make sure we're giving something back. every candidate 48 hours after they complete the assessment will get a report. And so we're sharing with them some of their skills and some of their development areas as well. We want to build this self-awareness of, we're asking you to do this assessment, so we're going to actually share with you what we found. And the next step, and in the question, I actually love the use of the word infused, because I think that's something that we want to do more of. We assess skills, we tell you about your skills, we have development on the program. How do we take that further? So how do we, when you join us on a program, how do you come in with that awareness, but also a plan of how you're going to build out those skills further, or a plan of how you're going to take that to the next level? And I think that's something we'd like to work on to take it even further, almost like phase 2 of the journey that we're on.
And just to chime in on that, Sarah, I think that is becoming a big thrust for people taking these total talent approaches, that they're considering, well, how can I even pre-skill somebody before they come in so they know exactly how to hit the ground running? And then as I go into, maybe I'm on the job learning, but on top of the technical skill that I might acquire, particularly apprentices or interns, what can I also learn from a behavioural skill that's going to get me ready? And so we're seeing a lot more recruitment and development practices come together, and strategies as well.
Makes an awful lot of sense. And I know if Stephen was here, one of the things he'd probably jump in with is some thinking around, where does sort of career coaching come into this total talent approach? Because it's one of those things that, you know, a lot of, if we're talking about a more diverse total talent approach, it might not come with that. And actually, how does the expertise that sits in the HE sector come and help inform this? I've got a conversation with our university steering group coming up to try and sort of feel our way through what that might look like. But if you've got any thoughts, that would be interesting. You're nodding at me, so I'm taking it as
resonating. I've got two things, and I'm going to shamelessly shout out Kingston University for their skills work, particularly, and yes, it's emerging, but bringing in organisations to support projects within curriculum. And I think employers would like more and more opportunities to do that. There are other universities kind of taking that approach, but I think we'll see more of that. It would be lovely to see that happening then for schools, for veteran organisations, for the rehabilitation of prisoners. We could go on, but I think that connection between employer and project, so you can understand the skills before you might put in an application or be sourced, is key. I completely agree with Stephen on the career piece. I think we will see almost internal career coaches become a massive rise. We can see it from a technology perspective already. Some of the career matching that we used to see happen at Attraction for recruitment now being adopted internally at great pace. It's just missing often then the professional career development services that actually universities often offer. I think we're going to see that needing to be offered within employers more. Whether they could go to their universities for that career service, who knows? But I think, yes, the work needs to transfer. I don't know, Hayley, if you've got anything else you'd add.
No, nothing else than that.
Wonderful, thank you. There's some quick fire ones in here, which for you, Hayley, I'll just run through those. And the duration of your mentorship programme, how long is that?
So this varies by programme. So for our internship programme, it's the duration. So whether that's 8 to 14 weeks in the summer. There's key points in the programme where you match with your mentor, and then opportunities to connect with them. And with our graduate programme, we introduced it last year, the intake in August. So we're sort of nearly 6 months into that, and we've just done a survey and got the good feedback on the relationship. The intention is we make the introduction and they support them throughout the programme, and then we'll continue to review the impact that that's having on the graduates. For our career discovery programme, that's actually just a 1-week insight programme. Something we did last year was we matched mentors for that programme, and they actually retained the relationship for a number of months after, and they covered different topics each month. Something else we trialed last year was then bringing that group back together, and almost and actually in our headquarters in Seattle, the mentors and mentees came back in for almost what we called an expo, and they could come back and have their final mentorship meeting together in the office and have sort of a fun day and a tour and things as well. So almost thinking about different ways we can have impact through those programs, but it does vary a little bit by program. And we do trial lots of different things and then measure and share the
Mm.
impact and decide as a team how we revisit that. I guess in our world, working on that cyclical basis of, the seasons and each year, it's about how can we improve each year and make it more impactful and better.
Mm. Well, if we've got time, I might come back to another question on that. But you talked about the summer internship programs. Don was asking whether you're considering increasing the duration of those. I mean, they do, and we know that from our own data, they do vary from employer to employer, but any thoughts on how that might change in the future?
Yeah, and I think the reason that with our team being global and our programs are also global, so we're striving, our strategy has been to strive for as much global consistency as possible, so that ideally we have interns in the business going through a similar experience, and from our global teams delivering that experience at a similar time. So I think that was our reasoning behind looking to have summer internships around the world, and the durations vary because of educational calendars and all sorts of things, but where possible. So this year we've almost got a big cohort joining in May, so everyone in India, and the first cohort in the US join in May, and then a cohort joining in June. So a second cohort in the US based on academic calendars, and then our UK interns join in June. And then I think we have some outliers. Montreal, for example, is a 14-week program. So it's almost, where's the business need? And then trying to think about how we scale that, because our numbers have been so big as well. But then when we run events, so we have a leadership series as an example. Our most senior leaders love coming to speak to the interns and doing like Ask Me Anything sessions. If we have as many people on program at one point, we can deliver that for everyone, and then they get that consistent experience, as opposed to someone being on program at a different time of year. There are lots of different internship durations that exist around the world, so we keep reviewing those and making sure we're having the most impact and can hire the best talent. I think that's where some of our additional programs will come in and complement through the year. But that has been our reason in the past for keeping it to summer.
Yeah, that must take an awful lot of juggling, so it totally makes sense. A quick question on visas for your interns, international hires. This is a whole topic. We're running a whole session on changes to visas in the UK. Just any quick thoughts on that one?
So I'm just looking back at the question.
Sorry, do your interns and international hires, do you expect them to have a work visa?
So I know this varies hugely by organisation, and for some of our roles, so some of our tech roles, we do have the opportunity to sponsor for a small number. Typically students would have the right to work, but there is an opportunity. But I know that varies hugely across different organisations and profiles.
Yeah, okay, marvellous, thank you. And then a quick follow-up came in from Donna, which you did quite early on. You were talking about the kind of your transition from the sort of very traditional campus-based recruitment model to where you are now, and you did say that that will continue to be important. It's just you're adapting and changing that relationship. So what will that look like, do you think? I mean, Donna's specific question was around, in-class online presentations to those undergrads, I guess either ahead of the internship recruitment or the sort of wider graduate programs. But just more broadly, is that going to shift, and how might it look different?
Yeah, so it does continue to be key for us. We have actually a school partnership model that we have in our toolkit. So the full set of slides which we can share, we have almost a platinum, gold, silver approach. So we know that with the size of our team, even the size of any team, you can't be everywhere. You can't be at every single school. You can't be in every single classroom as much as you would love to be and have that presence. So we have, platinum is schools where we have really key partnerships. In classroom at career fair. Gold is probably the next level. Our silver approach actually is alumni led. So we do have a toolkit, sort of a slide deck. Anyone across the business, if they want to go to their former school or university, they can take our toolkit and they can go and run that presentation, so that we can't be everywhere, but if other people want to go on our behalf, they can use content and things as well. So we have that. For the schools we do partner with, we work with student societies. So we do run events on campuses, and it will continue to be important, but every year we run a scorecard element of looking at data. So ROI data of the schools we work with, student demographic data, relevancy to our profiles, even proximity to some of our office locations. So we run that data every year to determine what our school framework looks like. And so we can prioritize our efforts so that it's very considered and thoughtful as we go out to different schools.
And data-led, which is one of your key
Yes.
messages all the way through all of this. So I'm really conscious of time. Nikki, is there anything you wanted to say to finish up, either on that or anything else?
Just to encourage people, hopefully listening to Hayley, they've seen how practical these approaches can be. And if anyone wants any more data, to reach out to Mike, who's put his details in the chat as well. Of course, Hayley and I, but Mike will make sure you get both the slides and the taxonomy and anything else that you need. So thank you. Thank you to ISE for putting the session on.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for coming along and sharing. And it would be remiss of me not to say that, you know, there are other webinars in the calendar. Please don't forget to look. There's a development conference, well, the apprenticeship conference is coming up first. Then we've got a global conference and a development conference, and we're already looking at the submissions for sessions for the recruitment conference. This theme, this subject, I mean, there's no question we're going to keep coming back to it. It's as you both said, you know, it's evolving, it's early days, you're learning from experiences, you're learning from the data. You know, our job as ISE is to kind of bring people together to have that shared experience and build that best practice. And it's very early days in all of this, but you know, having these opportunities, thank you both so much for kind of coming along and sharing where you are now. And I can't wait to hear, I'm sure, in a session in the future at one conference or another, how things have gone. And so we'll keep a careful eye on it. But massive thank you. Thanks to everybody for joining us. Have a lovely rest of the day. And we will no doubt see you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.